Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of T2RL Talks. And in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about revenue management. We've just published our annual survey of the market for revenue management solutions, in which we track the fortunes of the various vendors who are providing into this market. And we also try to give a bit of a summary of the current state of play in RM generally. And I think it's fair to say that probably as much as any other aspect of airline technology, the RM space is evolving very rapidly. And to discuss that, I have in the studio with me Jerry Foran and Rasih Ustun, and they are both T2RL consultants with vast experience in revenue management. And I'm looking forward to their insights into that world. So, hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
So, first up, we have been maintaining now for a couple of years that the move to what IATA calls modern retailing and we call OOSD is inevitable. It is going to happen. It's probably going to take quite a long time. But I have a question really, which is that in a world where offers are created in response to every query, does traditional revenue management still have a role to play? And I'm going to throw that one at Jerry to start with, because he said he knows something about it.
Did I say that, Ian? Well,
you
okay.
did.
I did. Okay. Well, so yeah, RM itself, or the science of, will certainly continue to exist. But whether it's a separate module, a greatly enhanced module, I don't think it's entirely clear how this is actually going to develop. Will RM sit inside OOSD? How will it be architecturally set up, and how will it actually work on a day-to-day basis with the wider suite of the new systems, offer and order in particular? So the science of RM will continue to exist, but today it focuses mainly on forecasting passenger demand on flights based on historic data, and it uses that data which is getting direct from its own systems, bookings made, bookings cancelled, etc., etc. But going forward, because OOSD or modern airline retailing are customer-centric, more customer-centric, more customer-focused, and the offers that will be made to customers will be based on that new set of customer data. It's not a different way, but it's a massive amount of additional data which can now be used in order to make sure that the offer, which was previously just the fare quote, but now the offer that will be made to the customer is much more one, contextual in terms of what the customer actually wants, and two, something that actually the customer will definitely sell. So conversion as a result of all this additional data inside the offer and order system or coming from external sources will make a far more effective revenue generating system than one would be if it just continued as it is today with a very limited set of data.
Okay. One thing that prompted my question was the announcement a while ago now from Saudia, who signed up for the Amadeus Nevio suite. But in that announcement, they made it clear they were certainly going to continue with their PROS revenue management solution, which suggests to me that RM will still have a role even as we move to offers and orders. Would you agree with that, Rasih?
Yes, Ian. And when we look at how offer optimization or price optimization are being developed and implemented today, the first implementations and the particular airline you mentioned. So we've been doing revenue management with booking class level data analytics, whether it's booking data, cancellations data, as Jerry mentioned, and fare data, and using all that information to run network optimization and determine a bid price in a simplistic way to explain that it's the displacement cost of selling each seat on each flight, right? So that's what we've been doing traditionally with our RM system. And now we do see price optimization, dynamic pricing systems coming on top of that, getting all that information from the core RM system and enhancing it with customer context, market context, etc., and its own analytics on what specific type of customers requires, what are their preferences, etc., to come up with the optimal price or the willingness to pay of each customer segment, which has to be obviously presented to the customer as the minimum cost or the displacement cost the airline needs to cover, plus additional willingness to pay from each customer segment. So that's how we started the dynamic pricing process, price optimization process. So RM systems are running today, core RM systems, and we have price optimizers working on top of that. The example you mentioned, Ian, sort of fits into that area, where I believe Saudia wants to continue using their core RM processing with pros and use offer management capabilities that Amadeus offers on top of that to present optimal prices to different type of customers that they serve. That's where we are today. But as we look into the future, at some point, all of these systems should ideally emerge and become a single offer optimizer. That's maybe a way out from now, but that's probably the direction it'll go. But as we stand right now, and if you look at the near future, I think what the example you mentioned Saudi is doing is definitely reasonable, and we do have examples of other airlines doing the same.
Okay, I want to pick a thread out of what both of you have just said, and that is the relationship between revenue management and pricing. It certainly in the early days of revenue management, it was really just about adjusting availability buckets, and pricing was something separate and something that was managed in really quite different channels. My feeling now is that RM and pricing are just two faces of a common set of activities within the airline, and that the idea of managing them separately is one that should have been consigned to history a while ago. Any thoughts on that, Jerry?
Yeah, well, it should definitely have been confined to history a long time ago. I can remember in my previous existence elsewhere that we had space control followed by yield management, followed by capacity management, followed by revenue management, and up until it was capacity management, that was purely, to your point, didn't really involve pricing at all, or if it did, it was purely published fares. So it was only when the separate pricing departments started to become more integrated with the capacity management department, and in many cases actually became the revenue management department, that they're effectively seen as one and the same thing. Still called revenue management and pricing very often, but actually it's one thing now. The management of inventory and price together is what revenue management is today, but will of course develop as we're talking about today.
Yeah, and we talk about moving on to, I guess, a further integration, because I think the science of offer creation and offer optimization is in some ways the next step on this journey to a more sort of joined up way of thinking about the commercial processes. I would posit that the big revenue management providers are in pole position to become the dominant players in offer management and offer optimization. Is that a naive view, or is that reasonable? Rasih?
It's definitely reasonable, Ian, and that's what we've seen actually in the market. The leading revenue management vendors, technology providers, are the first ones that came up with offer optimization, or more specifically, right to fly dynamic pricing solutions, and now they're working on their ancillary. Because they have the experience, they have the customer base, they have the data and relationships with their customers to test these models and to bring out new capabilities on top of all the work that they have done so far. So they have the advantage, like I said, and they have the know-how as well. So they've been leading the market. But having said that, we've seen other technology providers coming in and focusing on customer data analytics, customer segmentation, and specifically price optimization as well. Some of the vendors that have not been traditionally in the revenue management market for a long time, they have come in and started looking at this problem as well and solving it ideally in a different way or in a better way, as they claim, from the leading vendors. So although the leading vendors on the RM side have the edge, but there is more and more competition coming in. So, I mean, everybody should be watching out for that as well, especially themselves, as we look into price optimization and the future of offer.
And the idea that there are new entrants to the market and new ideas and new capabilities coming into the market can only be a good thing for the airlines who are looking for these solutions.
Definitely.
Rasih, you did touch on something there, which I think is interesting as well, and that is the ability to revenue manage ancillary services. We are seeing some of the big vendors offering that ability, but it's something that people like us have been saying needs to happen for at least the last 10 years. So why is it taking so long? Is it really hard to apply revenue management principles to ancillary services?
I see two areas where it's challenging, and vendors are trying to, or technology providers are trying to solve that. One is the availability of data, limited data. It's not like the passenger demand data that we can easily get from PNRs and tickets or from your inventory. On the ancillaries, when you look at it, the amount of, for example, historical sales and what this ancillary was sold, they're not in a structured way that can be collected in terms of input data, right? And how much the customer paid for it, etc. Those kind of things. The data collection part is a challenge. The availability of the data is a challenge. And the second piece that is challenging is what assumptions do you make when you're optimizing ancillaries? Are we saying that in a lot of cases, it's a secondary decision. It's a post-booking decision. You know, having booked my right to fly product at this fare level, what additional willingness to pay do I have to spend on an ancillary to select the seat or a bag or buy a meal, etc.? So there is that complication as well. It's conditional on what you paid already and what you're willing to pay. So that has to be modeled too. And within that, you have to look at multiple aspects, like, okay, from a customer segmentation piece is one, what the journey contains. Is it a long journey, for example, that I would need a nice seat, right? Is it a short journey? Does it have connections? And what are the availability of these seats on the flight as we talk about seats? And the flight attributes basically has to be considered as well. So the optimization part is also challenging. That has taken more time than right to fly optimization so far. But having said that, we have seen providers coming out in the market and offering solutions, and that they have actually deployed for mainly seats and bags at multiple airlines so far. And they're hoping they will get the data and they will be able to evolve their models to cover other type of ancillaries too as we go forward. But compared to right to fly, it's I think we're just taking the first steps at this stage.
I think additionally to that, you've got, going back to the history of how this was managed within airlines, you had the revenue management piece doing inventory and pricing, and you very often had, if not always, separate departments, whether it was sales or marketing, dealing with what may be described as ancillaries or separate holiday products. So there was never any real focus in a decade ago or so on how you could bring these two things together, because they were organizationally separate. Now, clearly, with modern airline retailing, airlines see that these things can be brought together or see the opportunity of bringing them together and offering it to the customer as a bundle. But that when we come to dynamic bundles, as Rasih was talking about the right to fly, if the ideal thing for an airline in some ways would be to sell the whole thing up front rather than the post-booking scenario. So where effectively you could discount the right to fly in order to sell a particular ancillary which may be very profitable or not. So there are many different ways of looking at that, and I think the combinations are, probably endless, which will mean the complexity will also become greater, and airlines will have to manage that very carefully.
Yeah, and that makes me think of the business model of some of the significant low-cost carriers around the place who, can sell a seat for €10 and then seek to recoup the revenue or make the revenue on the ancillary products and services.
Yeah.
And I think going forward, we're going to see a lot more of that. Something else that came up, Rasih, I think, mentioned that we don't have a great deal of historical data about ancillaries in the way that we do about right to fly. But even for right to fly, you do get times in the market where there's a sudden discontinuity in the market, and I'm thinking of events like the COVID pandemic or the 9/11 attacks going back 20 odd years. And at that point, historical data becomes a lot less valuable, and RM practitioners have to look at other indicators that guide their estimates of demand, and I think that certainly the most sophisticated of the RM providers are already doing that in quite a big way, and they're looking for a far wider range of demand indicators than just historical booking curves.
Yes, so there are different methods that the RM providers are taking a look. I mean, obviously the market context is really important. Looking at the airline's position, what you're offering, and the quality of service you're offering versus what the competitors are offering. Market demand indicators, I mean, you have a lot of shopping data available out there, whether it's from online sources or even big vendors like GDS sources that can be collected and used. Those are definitely things that can be brought in to an RM system, and other things like special event data can be gathered as well, that we've seen some vendors are working with special event data providers as well, or indicators as well. Even social media was something that I know some of the RM providers were looking at bringing in. If there's a lot of interest being seen a particular or being shared on a particular, let's say, vacation destination, that could be an indication that can be pushed out to the RM system, RM department, to take a look and see whether the demand can be increased or simulated for that particular destination, given all the discussions that are happening in social media. We do have those kind of modern data sources, which we didn't have maybe 20 years ago or maybe even 10 years ago, that are quite useful and can be used definitely for enhancing your RM optimization, without even, if you don't do any price optimization, if you look at core RM, the inventory management portion of it, those can feed in very well into your RM system as forecast, influencing the forecast as forecast influencers. And that could definitely initiate a new optimization, a new set of controls on that particular impacted flights and markets. So yes, I mean, I think we are a bit lucky now compared to the past on those.
I think another thing about the data is that, today you had data about I sold an ancillary, and you had data over somewhere else about I sold a flight. Now, the reality is with an order management system, with order, you'll have that data together in the same place, just the same as Amazon does for selling multiple products. So that data, which wasn't equally combinable or viewable or usable before, will now be there for the airline to use as they see fit. And they'll see when a flight was cancelled versus when an ancillary was cancelled, or rebooked or changed or whatever it is, the quality of that data will increase tremendously, which will give airlines a great opportunity to optimize the what they do compared with today.
Yeah, I think one of the characteristics of these new sources of demand data or demand indicators is that compared to prior booking curves, prior year booking curves that we had in the past, this new data is both much greater in volume and rather less structured. And it seems to me that this might be a really good use case for applying some of the AI tools that are coming into the market to help analyze and extract useful, actionable information from that data. And in conversations with some of the RM providers, I get the impression that that is exactly what some of them are doing. And we're in a world where everybody has to say they're using AI because otherwise their stock price will tank. But in reality, I think the big RM providers are applying some some AI techniques to their analysis of these bigger and less structured data sets. Certainly, in a conversation we had with probably the biggest of the RM vendors the other day, that came through.
I think it's true. It's true to say about revenue management that it started off being a very manual process with inventory controllers or yield management executives or whatever the term was, taking very close interests on booking behaviour at a very detailed low level, and then as networks became bigger and it became more complex, this became more difficult for an individual to understand and manage, but it didn't stop them trying to do it. And revenue management systems providers still would say, well, if a user wants to interface with the system and make changes to it, well, this is, we'll give them the opportunity to do that because the airline customers still seem to require that. And now, although that is changed more recently in time and relied more on accepting the recommendation of the system but having guardrails and all the rest of it in place and triggers, in a world of offer order and bundles and all the rest of it, this is completely not, it's not going to be possible. It would not be a sensible thing to do. So the use of machine learning and AI together will become critical, because otherwise airlines could get themselves in a real mess in what they actually produce, sheerly because of the volumes of data which you mentioned and the complexity of looking at all those data sources in a holistic way.
Yeah, and I think from the analysis perspective as well, Jerry, that usage of AI has good opportunities. I mean, using all this big data and generating indicators on how your demand and pricing can be impacted by all this new additional information you're ingesting into your RM optimization, that's definitely one case. The other one is for RM analysts to perform their jobs, or other people to look at how the performance is going. And that is one area I've seen at least some vendors investing in educating and guiding the people who are steering these RM systems. For example, simple things like to give them an overview of the performance of certain markets, to give them an overview of all the actions that they're taking and all the guardrails, etc., that they're putting in, whether that's helping or not. There is some element of it which can be used to actually educate and help the end RM analysts improve their actions and their productivity as well.
And I think it's also important that, and you see some vendors doing this and others not, is that if someone comes to ask the RM analyst, be it the manager or someone higher up in their organization, and says, well, why did you do that? To be able to go back and say, well, the data inputs that influence this particular decision were X, Y, Z, rather than say, well, it was a black box and I have no clue as to what exactly the answer was that was spouted out and why we sold that product at that level. To to your point, it's critically important that the RM analyst, or whatever we want to call them going forward, has some understanding of how it came to be that this was the offer that was made.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's move along a little bit. The report that we've just published is essentially a market survey of the market for RM solutions, and so let's just think about some of the dynamics in that market. One of the things we see is that still roughly a third of the market by volume, so not a third of the airlines, but airlines representing a third of all the passengers carried, are still building and maintaining their RM solutions in-house. Do we think that is sustainable in the long term, or will eventually the market move to the specialist vendors?
It's going to depend on what the airline's objective is, Ian, I believe. There are some very big airlines, as we know, that they want to keep the way they're optimizing and offering their inventory and prices proprietary. And they want to deploy certain models that others are not using and create differentiation. And they have the budget as well. I'm not going to name specific airlines, but a lot of them are aware, are well known in the industry. I don't see these airlines moving away from their in-house RM systems and models. They want to keep things proprietary. They want to be able to innovate internally and get their innovation into the market as quickly as possible, into their markets, obviously, as quickly as possible. And they also want to probably touch upon on the price and offer optimization as well. So for those airlines, I do expect that they'll continue managing their in-house RM systems and actually expanding on it as we look into ancillaries, bundles, etc., as Jerry was mentioning earlier. For the airlines that obviously don't have, there's a budget issue as well. For the airlines that do not believe they can keep up with the evolving industry, the techniques, the models, the science, the ideas that are being presented by the technology providers. Obviously there's the science portion of it and there's the investment portion of it as well. For those airlines who do feel that they're not going to be able to keep up with the market, and they do see definitely much better options ready-made from the vendors available, they will probably start making some arrangements to move to a, not a standard, but a vendor-provided system and replace what they have in-house. That's how I see the two directions they will take.
That's very much Sorry, go on, Jerry.
I think it's also, and it links to the science bit, even in today's world of RM, some carriers, albeit not the large ones, have outsourced the revenue management capability because they can't find the expertise and skills in their geographic region or whatever to actually do this. So if we go forward, this is going to become even more difficult for that expertise and skill to be locally sourced. So they're more likely they're going to increasingly rely on vendors, unless, to your point, they're very large carriers and can input their own science into whatever vendor they're working with.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a dynamic quite like what we saw with PSS 20 years ago, as airlines that had traditionally run their PSS in-house decided exactly that it was too big an investment to sustain, and they were better off going into a community where costs would be shared and the vendor would be doing some of the heavy lifting. Another thing that comes out of our survey is that there are still hundreds of airlines, literally hundreds of airlines, without an RM system at all. On the whole, they're very small airlines. They're airlines that are in very specific markets where the usual considerations don't apply. But of the ones that do have an RM system, by far the majority still have a straightforward leg-seg simple RM system, and still, even 20 years after its introduction, relatively few airlines have got a full network optimization, O&D based system. And I don't think that's going to change very much now, because I think any airline that maybe was considering moving to O&D is also considering moving to OOSD, and that change will just get swept up. Would anyone disagree with that, or am I probably?
I'd entirely agree with that statement. I mean, if you haven't got an O&D system already, and you're thinking about the future, then thinking about moving to purely looking at revenue management from an O&D perspective would not be a sensible way forward. I think they've got to take into account what the world is going to look like in 5 to 10 years, because that would be the usage of an O&D system anyway, minimum usage based on the investment costs. So I think you're absolutely right. And today, to your point, even though we have large network carriers out there who don't have true O&D systems today, but seem to manage perfectly well. So it's airlines are very, very different in decisions they make about how they can best optimize revenue.
Yeah. And if anyone listening to this isn't really sure of the difference between a leg-seg system versus an O&D system, we do have a small explainer within the report that we've just published. The last thing I just want to talk about is, again, almost a philosophical thing. Is RM even a single thing anymore, or is it now becoming an assembly, certainly for the big sophisticated carriers, an assembly of different components that they're having to integrate in terms of right to fly, ancillaries, bundling, personalization, all of those things? We've talked about a trend that may exist called bring your own science. So are we in a position where some of the very sophisticated data science techniques are being applied actually from an external system to the core RM system? And is that a viable way forward, or is it all just going to get way too complicated for anyone to manage? Rasih, I know you've looked at a little bit of these bring your own science solutions. What do you think?
I mean, it's a very good question, Ian, and it's an important consideration as you look into the future. Because today, I mean, whether we like it or not, the right to fly piece is separated from ancillary and bundling pieces, right? Those are like 3 different pieces that both the vendors and airlines themselves are doing research on. And they try to solve the problem somewhat separately, but with information that is changed between each other. In the future, I mean, obviously, as these things evolve, it is a great idea to bring all of these into a common offer optimization platform and try to look at the revenue management problem in a consistent way. I mean, all the different components of it have differences in the way your objective is and what you're trying to optimize and what you're trying to get. But from a consistency perspective, starting all the way from how you segment the market, your consumer segmentation, that you should be using the same type of customer types as you're planning for your right to fly RM, ancillary and bundle revenue management for those. Then you can apply different models to solve different problems. But as you collect feedback from these customers or from the type of customers that you're optimizing for, the feedback should be consistent and it should be fed in the same or similar manner to different components of the optimizer. So the way you can model this and keep things in a unified offer optimization platform, and the more consistency you can bring around how you define your ground rules for revenue management, and how you define your performance measurement and feedback, revenue benefits, etc., are going to improve things, I think, going forward. And it's going to make things more clear and more reliable for the revenue management departments. Otherwise, we will all be working on our individual things over time, and we don't know what the big picture is going to look like when it comes to a total RM, right? So that's how I see this moving forward.
Okay. And Jerry, you're nodding sagely there.
I'm nodding sagely. I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. Well, look, we've had a good conversation. we've talked about some of the things that are in the report. For anyone not familiar with our market survey reports, we actually cover more than 20 providers of RM solutions. We cover their market shares in both LegSeg and O&D and groups revenue management, which is something we haven't touched upon in this conversation, but is another aspect. We've got some tables of market shares and how things are moving upwards, down, sideways, whatever. And on the whole, if anyone is really interested in the market for airline revenue management systems, I think this is essential reading. So if you're a subscriber to T2RL.net, please come on the website, download the report and have a good look at it. If you're not a subscriber, I know some people who would be very happy to talk to you about a subscription, and just drop us an email. And of course, we will also be continuing this conversation at the T2RL Engage conference in London in September, when Jerry and Rasih and I and other RM experts will be there to have the conversation with you. So for right now, I'd like to thank Jerry, I'd like to thank Rasih for this conversation. And most of all, of course, I'd like to thank you for listening. And I look forward to talking to you again in the next issue of T2RL Talks.